What is up, beautiful beings of light? Maria here. I am jumping on um, to share something pretty personal with all of you. Um, Whoever all of you is, whoever listens to this, watches this. And I know I usually start my videos by saying, this won't be that long. And then it ends up being long. So what I've learned is don't say that anymore. Because when I express, I tend to have a lot to say. I don't talk all the time, but when I talk, I tend to have a lot that I need to say and share. So this is something that I have been dealing with for the last few months, and Spirit has encouraged me to share it now as medicine for others. I had to really kind of process it a lot since actually July 11th. And I think I'm ready now to share my story. And I just want to preface this with a couple things. My intention for sharing this, first of all, is not to be seen as a victim or to get sympathy from people. Quite actually the opposite. The reason I'm sharing this is, again, it's for medicine for others, because I know I'm not the only human walking this earth plane that has experienced something of this magnitude. So, with that said, what I am going to talk about in this, it's sensitive information, meaning, it could be triggering, especially if you're somebody that has struggled with any kind of abuse in your life, sexual abuse. It may be triggering for you. So I just want to put all that out there before you sit and listen to however long this ends up being, because it's emotionally triggering. And again, I don't share this for any sort of sympathy, especially anybody that knows me or feels connected to me. Please don't internalize this trauma that I share with you as your own. I'm a big girl. I'm working through it. And I've really learned that, as painful as this remembering has been and going through all of the feels of it, it's also very transformational in my spiritual journey, my human journey. So with that said, I kind of want to just start by talking about what it means to have an open heart. Because I think I know there's a lot of misconceptions about what does it mean to have an open heart. And what I've learned, my friends, is about an open heart. And I've learned about the true energy of love, not this version of love that we've been taught to believe in this reality, right? We've really been taught this conditional form of love, from the ego perspective, right? So, and this isn't a judgment. This is just how this game has played out. We've all been taught this very conditional energy of love. And I work with energy. I work with the true energy of love, which I, equate that to source energy, creator, universe, God, whatever, word resonates with you. To me, it's just an energy. I've merged with the creator. I've literally merged with that energy and been able to see life through that perspective. And it's just an energy. There's no other way to say it. It's not a person. It's not a male. It's not a female. It's not anything physical. It's this very, very empowered energy, and powerful because it's empowered. So I kind of want to just share my understanding and perspective of what it means to have an open heart. Because if you sit and listen to this, it takes an open heart to listen to what I'm going to share with you and not be pulled into the trauma and the darkness of the narrative. An open heart trusts. An open heart loves with no conditions. It accepts all truths. all realities. It doesn't judge, it doesn't criticize, it doesn't have opinions. It's just this essence of us. To me, it's the true essence of who we are. And while in the physical body, we have the organ, the heart, but then we also have the energy center, the heart chakra center, right? And having this energy center open means that you have this capability to go into the darkest places with, not saying you don't feel fear when you go into them. 100,000% you feel fear when you navigate these fear-based paradigms, these traumas, these dark places. The heart, though, it knows it's going to be okay, because the heart really, to me, is the portal to our soul. And our soul has known all of these realities forever. It never didn't know these realities that I'm going to share with you. It's the human part of us that forgot that this was the game we signed up for. So I really don't even think we're having spiritual awakenings. We're having like human awakenings, right? The spirit is always awake. The spirit is always aware. It's always in this loving state. It's never not connected to source. When we're in the human experience, we tend to think we're disconnected, but that's a belief. It's a very disempowering belief. And when we attach to that belief, that is our reality. We believe we're not connected to our guides. We're not connected to our higher self. We're not connected to source. And, you know, sort of the cosmic joke is we're never not connected. Like, we're never not connected. When you really understand that we're immortal souls, that means we never die. It means we never really go anywhere. We're never lost. The human aspects of us are, the egoic structure of us can get lost, can feel lost, and it will convince us that we're lost. But the soul knows what it came to experience. That's my truth. I've seen it so many times at this point, seen it, experienced it, felt it, however you want to receive what I'm saying. But I've experienced it so many times. There's not even a doubt in me that my soul knew everything that it came to experience in this journey. The good, the bad, the in between. So really having an open heart, most of us don't have open hearts. And I say that because I do a shitload of energy healing on people of all walks of life, all professions, in professions of service, nurses, military, you name it, teachers, you know, healthcare workers, you name it. I do energy healing. I don't even like to call it healing. Energy shifting is what I actually call it. But most people know it as energy healing, and I say that because I don't feel that I'm healing anyone. I only self-identify as a healer because I've healed myself, and I'm healing myself every single day. That's why I'm a healer. But when people come to me for services, I give them information, I give them tools, and I give them guidance from a much higher perspective, from that source, that loving energy that shifts energies and awareness in them. What they do with that is on them. Either they take those tools and those little tidbits of wisdom and they apply it in their life and they go on a self-healing journey, or they just let the information saturate. Like, we're all different. How we process all of this is very different and unique to us. We're unique individuals, even though we are from one single source, right? There's that oneness that I've been connecting with a lot this last year, really. I've been brought to that energy of oneness a lot and been shown life through that perspective. I used to say, you know, when I would first connect with it, like, this is what I envision, like, a near-death experience to be like, you know, like a near-death, like my physical body having a near-death experience. Last year, I was like obsessed with near-death experiences and listening to them. And now I know why. And I'll get to that in this video. But yeah, really, you know, having an open heart means that you are able and willing to trust when there doesn't seem like a reason to trust. When everything around feels like deceit and lies and trauma, and our ego self wants to run from all of that. It wants to numb out. It wants to distract. It doesn't want to face that kind of stuff. That's the ego. Because again, what is the ego's job? It's to protect the human. Protect the human from feeling. Protect the human really from experiencing humanness, right? The ego is there to make us comfortable, if you will. That's the mechanism of it. But really, the irony of it is that when it's very unconscious to us, it keeps us in suffering. And then even as we start becoming aware of it, it can still very much keep us in suffering. The heart is not afraid to suffer. The heart is not afraid of the experience of suffering. It's not afraid of anything. It's not afraid to be uncomfortable. It's not afraid to feel pain. That's why I say, my friends, open hearts. There are not a lot of people walking around with them. When I do energy healing, I see walls, barricades around people's hearts. And then you tell people that and they don't understand, because it's like, what? I've always been giving. I'm always a giver. I'm always doing for others. That means I have an open heart. And I would argue, yeah, it's part of a program. I'm not saying that, we're not innately designed to want to be of service to each other. Of course we are. That's part of the compassion. That's part of the unconditional love energy. But that's very different than this need. We all have the ego needs, because the ego is attached. So the ego has this need to fix, to heal, to save, it's a very different energy, right? And most of us, our whole lives have been operating off of that. And I know this again because of all of the different people I work with, and everybody's story has the same tune, has the same song to it. We have different experiences we've gone through, but the song I hear everybody singing is the same. And it's this drained, exhausted, I'm so tired of giving. And what about me, right? And it's because we haven't had an open heart for ourselves. That's what having an open heart actually means. It's all an internal job. Everything is internal in this world. But we live in a world where everything has taught us to seek in the external. And to not even just to seek, we seek the external, but then we're also like giving to the external. Like we literally give that life force away to things in the external. And it's mostly done unconsciously because our hearts are very guarded. They're so guarded, which means they're not open, which means the ability to be able to go into the darkness and feel all of it, but not become it, is extremely hard if your heart's not open. There is a serious misconception. And I can speak from my own experience. When I was younger, I had this perception of people that now I realize actually had an open heart, right? But I had this perception of them that they were weak, that they were naive, that they were ignorant, because how could they have so much love and compassion in such dark situations. I was jealous. There was an aspect of me that was jealous of that. So it judged it. It thought, you just don't live in reality. You just pretend like you're not hurting. And it's like, no, now that I've really gone back in this life review and recognized that these particular people that I would say I judged, I didn't understand it. Now I realize, because I know energy doesn't lie, you can't fake it. We as the human can put up a great facade, because that's what the ego does. It's the false self, really. So it's really good at being a facade and creating facades for us. And so what I recognized is those people had fucking huge hearts, open hearts that were willing to forgive. Forgiveness, my friends. Oh, fuck. Let me tell you, that's a potent energy. And it's something, again, that we think we grasp the understanding of. We think we grasp the concept, but we don't. Because until we have felt that energy in our body, that's what it means to embody. It means to be in the body, not disconnected, not disassociated, not distracted, but fully present in the body and feeling everything that the body has been holding on to for a very, 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 very long time. Okay. It takes an open heart to be able to sit in that pain. And I've done it so many times these last 5 years. I have opened my heart to my pain. I have opened my heart to the pain of the world around me. And let me tell you, there's a lot of fucking pain in both my internal and external worlds. There is a lot of pain on this earth plane. And when you have an open heart, you're willing to see all of that, but not just see it. It's beyond seeing. This whole fucking thing goes beyond what you can see with your eyes. Your eyes are deceitful because they're connected to your brain, to your ego. So your eyes only see what your ego is willing to look at, how your ego is willing to read things. It's got nothing to do with what your eyes are willing to see. But what are you willing to feel in your body? Because I am shown so many times when I have assisted energies and psychopomp, which is the shamanic practice of crossing people into the light. And I say it like that because to me, what I'm doing is I am assisting this persona that walked in a human journey, this human persona, this egoic structure. I'm assisting that egoic structure to integrate with its higher self, its soul, which is literally what I'm doing while I'm still in the human avatar, what millions of people are doing. There are millions of us doing this work, and I know that. I choose to focus my attention on that. I focus my attention on the fact that I know there are so many of us doing this work, and there are so many of us that have been doing this way before me. Because that tells me for as much darkness as on this planet, there is just as much, if not more light. That's why we're seeing more chaos. It's why we're seeing more of the collective shadow. You cannot see shadow if there is no light. So being the light is having an open heart. Your heart is the light. You cannot be the light if you don't have an open heart. You can't. How can you shine so bright if you're not willing to go into the depths of darkness? And everybody's darkness is different. Darkness has, again, this negative connotation that it's evil. No, darkness is just unconscious. It's just unconsciousness. That's all darkness is. It's actually light, fragmented light. And here's the kicker too. Everybody's so afraid of the shadow, so afraid of the dark, but yet everybody wants to tap into their spiritual gifts. Guess what? That's where your gifts are. They're hiding in the dark. Your power, which is just love. Your powers, which is just love, is there behind all of the dark, behind all of the unconsciousness, behind all of the fear. So an open heart is willing to face fear, head the fuck on. Because people ask me, I don't even know what it means to face fear. I know you don't, because you've spent your whole life numbing out from fear consciousness, because we live in a fear-based game. This is literally a fear-based game. So we're all surrounded by fear all the time. We're actually living in fear all the time. But then when we start becoming conscious, all of a sudden there's a fear of the fear. And it's like, yeah, but we've been living in it our whole lives. If you're somebody that watches this and identifies with being an anxious person or having anxiety, good job. Acknowledge that. Acknowledge that you've lived in fear your whole life, because that's what anxiety is. It's fear. And it runs the nervous system in a very unconscious way. So I start this about an open heart because what I'm going to talk about requires an open heart to listen to, hold space, and do not internalize this as your own. And if this trauma mirrors something that you also carry, then let it be medicine for you. In whatever way, shape, or form that means, just let it be medicine. Okay? Because my soul has showed me many times that the things I have endured in this life that my human self would label as trauma or challenging or painful is literally meant to be medicine and shared with people who are ready to receive. That is what I feel like we're all here to do. But it comes down to choice. And are we willing to do the work on ourselves, for ourselves? Are we willing to do this courageous work for ourselves? We're willing to do all these different things for all these people, right? Because again, that's the tune of everybody's song. I just want to help people. All I've done is just help people. I'm always the doer. Nobody does for me, right? It's like such a collective narrative. I also sang it, so I know. It's not a judgment. It's an observation. I had a conversation with somebody via text about an open heart earlier this week. And I think that that's why it keeps coming in over and over. Like, really help people to understand what it means to have an open heart, because we really don't. And you won't understand it until you experience it in your body. What I say to you could resonate with you, could sound good, but until you've experienced it, you won't understand. You won't understand maybe. And then there's some people who probably do understand as they listen to me, because they're doing the same things I am. So an open heart, to recap, it trusts. It trusts in everything that's happening. It trusts in the shit show that is taking place out on this 3D, fourth dimension Earth that I seem to still be semi-trapped in. My heart literally just said, you're not trapped. I know. See how the conversation, ego's trapped, heart, higher self, soul's like, you're not trapped in anything. I know. I mean, full on chills with that. So for people that still need, physical validation out there, which there's many of us, that's how my body reacts to truth. So the heart trusts when there is nothing to fucking trust in. The heart trusts. The heart loves when everything seems to be unlovable. And the heart forgives. Even when the human still has to go through its process of it. Okay? So I encourage all of us to start really having an open heart. Because the noise out there, the noise in the external world, it ain't going anywhere. And the more that people, quote unquote, wake up, whatever the fuck that even means anymore. Because there's awake, and then there's awake, and then there's awake, and then there's awake, and then there's awake. It's a process. There's no just one wake up call. There's no just one and done. We're healed and we're this new version. No. That's why an open heart trusts the process. It knows that this is a process. And really, it doesn't even call it a process. It calls it an experience. It's the mind that still calls this all a process. It's just an experience. So let's just, for a few seconds before I dive into my darkness with y'all, let's just take a couple nice, deep cleansing breaths. And just set an intention for yourself to listen to this information. My story. This is my story, okay, everyone? This is my story, Maria Gingras. This is not your story. This is my story. You don't have to like it. You don't have to agree with it. And you sure as fuck do not have to internalize it as your own. Okay? Just feel the love that I'm sharing in it. Because that is the only intention behind sharing this. Because I know there's other people out there that need this message. How do I know that? Because my human self needs this message. So I know there's other human selves out there that need this message. So here we go. So So anybody that listens to this, that's listened to other things of mine, may or may not know I was adopted. I was born in Colombia. I came here when I was about 14 months old. I've always known I was adopted. My beautiful parents here in the States always made that an awareness for me. I don't remember this big discussion about it. It's like I just always knew it was my truth. And my parents always encouraged like a pride in it for me. They always wanted me to be proud of where I came from, and that was important to them, and it helped me as a kid, because I've met a lot of people that are adopted, and some people like didn't find out till they were older, and it was like devastating. And thankfully that's not my story. Thankfully my parents always made it my truth. That I really can't remember being sat down and told one time, you were adopted. It's like I always understood it. I knew it from the time I knew it. I don't know, can't explain it, but I've always known. And then as a kid, in elementary school, I remember doing projects in Colombia, being proud of where I came from and being grateful. I always was grateful that I had what I believed to be like two sets of loving parents. I had, my biological parents, who the story was they didn't have money to support me. And so they gave me up for adoption, right? It's a beautiful story. And that story got me through most of my life, believing in the love of both sets of parents, believing that I was loved and cared for. In that orphanage in Colombia, right? All these things. I mean, fuck, I even have Colombian Queen tattooed above my ass. So there was always this part of me that was proud of my roots, right? My roots of my avatar. And always felt connected to Colombia. And then as I met Colombians, throughout my life, it was always like, oh, Colombian, right? So yeah, I was born there. I did always know too, the dark side of Colombia, because people always told me that. When they found out I was Colombian, it always goes to the drug lords, right? Pablo Escobar and cocaine and the dark side of Colombia. So I was always aware of that too, which also fostered even more gratitude that I wasn't living that life, right? It made me even more grateful that I was adopted and living here in the United States with the family that I lived with. And, yeah. So I've always known that darkness, Colombia. Well, so like flash forward to my spiritual awakening, which I've shared before, began 2018, really ramped up in 2019. And when I started taking my shamanic apprenticeship, which was in 2020, 3 years ago, that's when I started diving deep into my shadow. Prior to that, I was taking psych development classes and Akashic records and waking up to the earth plane, all of the quote unquote conspiracy theories, all of the deceit, the darkness, the lies, the shadow of this human game. That I started becoming very aware of towards the end of 2018, early 2019. Didn't know how to navigate that. Literally didn't have anybody in my life at the time that I felt I could share all of that with, because all it was doing was amplifying like fear in me. The more I was learning about, like, I've always been afraid of the world my whole life. And as I share with you, you'll understand why. I've always been afraid of the world. I've always known that there's darkness and evil in the world, right? I've always been afraid of the fucking world. Then when I started to dive even more into the deceit and the darkness, it was like, oh my God, no wonder why I've always been afraid of the world. Now I'm even more afraid of the world, right? And I started learning of all of the human trafficking that takes place, the crimes against humanity, if you will, that many people out there are talking about now. There's so much of this out there now, like how people can't be aware of this to some degree. It's like it's plastered all, it's everywhere. Like social media has just become now another platform of news media that just, it's duality. There's a beautiful side to it, and there is very distracting dark side. But I believe in the power of intention, and everything comes down to intention. So it's how we're using all these tools and platforms is what it comes down to. What intention are we using it for? Right now I'm using technology to share my story, my truth, my medicine with an intention of love. But in that, I will talk about some of the paradigms that some people who may watch this, what I share, you're going to say, that doesn't really happen. That's a conspiracy theory. Okay. If that's what you choose to believe, that's what you choose to believe. I haven't really been given that out from my higher self. I know it's true. The things that the powers that be do to humans is a lot for people to swallow. I get it. We don't want to think that people that have portrayed having our best interest at heart are really not coming from a place of unconditional love. They're coming from an unconscious and some conscious fear energy. Because also understand this, I see all things that happen down here as love or fear, love or fear, love or fear. It's not even good or bad, right or wrong, evil and pure. It's literally, it's either love that's driving it or it's fear. And all of these dark narratives, all of the crimes against humanity, all of that, it's all fear energy behind the curtain that's running it. It's all fear energy. That's why it creates fear in people, because it is literally fear energy embodied in a body. And fear fears itself. And what I tell you about love is not afraid of anything. Love actually loves fear. Love knows that fear is a very powerful and potent teacher. It loves fear. That's alchemy. When love can love the fear to the point where fear becomes love, that's alchemy. And that is what I do as an energy shifter, as a healer on myself. I alchemize that fear into love. I integrate the ego into the higher self. I bring the darkness into the light. Not to become the darkness, but to pull that darkness in. And now the darkness becomes one with the light. So there's a lot of crimes against humanity that happen, human experimentations of all sorts of calibers. Anybody need a validation, physical validation? With my arm. That's true. All sorts of experiments happening down here. Adrenochrome. I'll say the word one time, just because it's a hot word that could get censored. But there it is. Many people know that this is a true fucking thing that's happening. It has been happening for eons. This isn't a new thing in this earth game. It's been happening So, well, let's put it this way. Since these lower dimensions existed, and there's no space and time, since these lower dimensions existed, these have always been the realities of these lower dimensions. Do you understand that? These lower dimensions don't go anywhere. They're not going anywhere. These will always be a reality in a lower dimension. It's not going anywhere. We as individuals can choose to raise our vibration, right? How do we do that? You have to go into the darker dimensions and you have to love every aspect of it. Forgive every aspect of the darker dimensions. It's the only way you ascend. It's really kind of that simple. It's the only way your ego ascends. You're already fucking ascended, remember? We're already ascended. Our higher self is ascended. But the egoic structure, that's the part that wants to ascend, that needs to ascend. Its mission is to ascend. Well, it has to sit with its shit. All of it that has been masking, literally hiding from. So the word I used. There's a lot of people that know that to be very true and that it's happening. And then there's a lot of people that are going to watch this and say that that's a conspiracy theory and you're triggered and you're anxious right now, even hearing the word. And then there's some people that are like, what the fuck is that? And you're Googling it. Well, I wouldn't Google it, first of all, because here's another clue. You know, Google Chrome, the word Chrome. What did I just say before? Yeah, the powers that be, they put all the truth right in our face. That's what hidden in plain sight is referring to. Like literally, they're like, hey, you guys know this happens. Your souls know this happens down here. Your human selves forgot. So we're just gonna put all these little clues and like literally shove them right in your face. So Google Chrome, if you Google that word, it's gonna tell you that it's a conspiracy theory. I'm here to tell you it's not, because I lived it. I lived it. Validation. So while I was doing my shamanic apprenticeship, I started diving deep into my shadow. And just like this process works, my guides, which are just my higher self, started navigating me through my layers of darkness and getting me to swallow certain narratives, accept them, forgive them. This has happened over the last, like I said, 3, 4, 5 years. And so, you know, I'm shown, why didn't I want to have kids in this lifetime? Okay, well, first I'm always brought to a past life because that's easier for the human ego to grasp at first. Past life readings are great, I feel like, in the sense of when we're starting the journey, we can connect a lot of dots in regards to what's happening in our current life by using a past life and saying, oh my God, this is why I am this way. Okay. And we can kind of swallow trauma from that life a little bit easier than when you know trauma happened to this body and this reality. So to me, past lives are great for that. They're a tool. And that's kind of how my journey started. I was brought to these other lifetimes that in linear time and space appeared to be in the past. They're kind of giving me answers as to why I was the way I was in this life, why I had a fear of this, that. And for me, my whole life, I've never wanted kids, but to the point where like, it was like a fear, I guess. Like, it was like, I never want them. I was always like, oh, fuck no. And most people that don't want them, they say, I don't want to bring a kid into this dark world. That wasn't ever my reasoning. I didn't know my reasoning. I didn't understand it, but I just knew that since I was a kid, I felt very uncomfortable around kids. That's why I've always gravitated to older people my whole life. When I was a kid, felt uncomfortable as a kid, and I felt uncomfortable around kids. And I could usually only be with like one kid at a time. It was like too overstimulating for me. It's very sensitive. So, I had all these ways about how I was and created all these stories that I was just an oversensitive, weakling kind of, right? So I start the shamanic apprenticeship and I'm shown like, well, you lost kids in this lifetime and you felt like it was your responsibility and this happened in this lifetime. And it was like, okay. So I can see why that maybe I carried that memory into this life and that's why I don't want kids. But there was still, I knew there was still something deeper. There's always something deeper. Always. So, the last few years I've also been I've connected with my birth mom. I remember I connected with my birth mom probably, oh, fucking now, time's an illusion for legit for me. So it could have been 2 years ago. I just remember I was in the bath and like not attempting to journey, but whenever I'm in water, it's like just fucking really happens like spontaneously. And it was like I had this connection. I was connected to my birth mom in spirit. I was shown that she's deceased, and but I was shown how I was conceived, and I was shown that she was raped. So yeah, I'd say that was probably that was 2 years ago. Yeah, it was. It's actually over 2 years ago because I remember going home and sharing this with my parents, and I haven't been back to the East Coast in over 2 years. So I got to psychically connect and see it all. And when I say see, I mean feel. I say see because as humans, it's just, but it's like, yeah, clairvoyantly I'm seeing it, but it's like energetically I'm in the experience again. I'm remembering it. It's no different than you having a memory resurface of something that happened in this life. Like that's my awakenings. That's what an awakening is to me. It's a remembering that nobody could tell me otherwise because I fucking remember it. My body has always remembered it. It's now my mind is accepting it as truth. And so this full energetic memory comes back. It's like you're there. It's like you're right back there. It's like putting on a song. And like how songs, it can be very nostalgic for us. And it literally takes us back to that moment in time. Well, that's what my spiritual experiences are like. It's like putting on a fucking song and it's like, oh my God, how did I forget this? So then I sat with that for a couple of years. Oh, okay. So I was conceived in rape. Makes sense. That means, and I was shown, that the person that raped my mother was a stranger to her. She didn't know him. So it was like all this fear ingrained into me in utero of men, strange men, fear of sex. So again, I started having answers as to why I was the way I was in this life, because that has also been a huge fucking thing for me. Sex, my whole life, like afraid of it to such a degree that it didn't make sense to me, like right down to going to a gynecologist and not being able to have fucking pap smears the first few times I went. Like I was that like petrified. And I literally thought, what the fuck is wrong with me? I've never been abused. Joke's on me. But again, the ego doesn't want us to know these things because that's very uncomfortable stuff to know and to sit with and to feel. So it shoves it all the way back into the subconscious where it just sits. But then it runs rampant in your body. So, I connect with my birth mom and I sit with that for the last couple of years. I swallow that. I accept that. Flash forward to June of this year. We're in Sedona, having this magical sound healing journey on top of a freaking mountain. And all of a sudden, my biological father's face, right, is right in. I've never seen him. I've never tried. I've never like said don't, but I've never tried. And then it was both of them. But they were like telling me that they were proud of me and they were thanking me. Full on chills again. they were thanking me for something. It was like they were thanking me for, releasing the pain, the generational pain, for forgiving. So I had to really work on forgiving my biological father. And probably I'm still working through that. And so that happened in June. That's right. That was June 22nd because it was my anniversary. But both biological parents come in and it's like, whoa, they're both here. This is weird. And they're both proud of me. And like, I know why, but I don't really know why. But I know why now. Flash forward to, I want to say it was like maybe somewhere between June 22nd and July 11th. I was outside. I was rocking my little chihuahua like a baby because he didn't get much love in the first 5 years of his life. So, he's a little resistant to it, but he wants it. So I'm out there rocking him like a baby and I'm just talking to him and I'm like, I know we have a lot of the same traumas, the same insecurities, literally just talking to him. And as I'm doing it, a memory I'm in the orphanage that I was in, that I've been shown 2 other times before, but only glimpses. And it was me like laying in this crib type thing and the little tiny window that I would look out. That's the only like memory I've ever had of like being there up until this day. All of a sudden I'm there and I'm looking out that little tiny window again and I hear and feel chaos around me, like babies crying and like just torturing kind of sounds happening all around me. And I immediately get a sick feeling in my body. So like put Sonic down and I'm just like, what the fuck is happening right now? Like, so I sit down and I sat with it with my open heart, as much as I wanted to numb out and like, what, I don't want to know what this is. I can't, I'm at a point in my spiritual journey. I can't anymore. There's no numbing out. There's no running from any of this. These memories just keep on keeping on. I heart's open. Isis, my guide, one of my very powerful guides last year, asked me if I was ready, and she literally branded my heart with the ankh and was like, yeah, but are you ready? And I fucking knew in that moment in time, like, you're going into battle, but you're going to be okay. I'm hearing all this torture and now I'm seeing it. And I just sat with it for however long it came up. And I let it move through me. And I had another deeper understanding of my like fear of children, or my even like a judgment of kids. It was like, we're weak. Look how weak we are. Look at what they're doing to you. You're weak. Right? I didn't know that I had created that story in my head, but now I do. Now I know that that was one of the unconscious energies kind of feeding I never want kids in this lifetime. July 11th. I don't even remember what I was doing. I feel like I was just like, actually, I think I was like doing laundry or something. I was doing something very just mundane, like around the house. And all of a sudden, I'm brought right back to that scenario again. But instead of seeing it happening to everybody else, because come on, See how crafty the ego is? Like, I should have known at that now moment in time that what was happening around me would also happen to me. But the ego protected me. It was like, oh, no, see, you just absorbed everybody's trauma. That's why you and Sam have been working with this paradigm of freeing the children since you've been doing your spiritual work together. Because she and I have. That's what I mean. Like, she and I have been very aware of these dark narratives of the underground tunnels and the islands and where all these kids are. And because we've been brought there psychically and done energy work for these kids. This has been a huge part of what she and I have been doing for a while. So I knew there was a reason for that. I knew I was connected to these kids, right? But see how the ego protected me. It was like, yeah, but you're not quite ready to swallow the full truth yet. So you're going to keep doing this work. And higher self's going to keep dropping more seeds for you to sit with, process, accept, and forgive. So you can receive the next little spoonful. So July 11th, I had all sorts of memories come back. I could feel it in my body. I saw the grotesque things that were done to me. And I felt so sick. And then my higher self said to go, then I was questioning it, right? I'm like, is this just because I know this happened? You know, because the ego is trying now to convince me, oh yeah, this doesn't really happen. So now I'm like, but like internally, I know it happened. Crying. I'm like dry heaving. And I text Sam because I'm like, I just need complete validation right now because the ego's going to try to talk me out of this. I texted her and all I said was, I need you to ask spirit if what I'm experiencing right now is truly a memory that happened or if it's a story being created in my head. That's all I said to her. Didn't even tell her what it was about. I immediately get a response that she got a sick feeling in her throat and I think solar plexus or sacral in her. And unfortunately, yes, it's true. And that's all I needed. Then I sat with that for the next few days. Processed it, screamed, yelled, punched things, cried, puked, shit, had a massive headache. I mean, you name it. All sorts of stuff. Then I shared it with my husband the next day, which was very healing for me. And then I carried on through life, meaning each day there was an aspect of that truth I had to sit with and feel and acknowledge. And every day I came out on the other side with a deeper understanding of myself. And more importantly, with a deeper love for myself. It helped me to realize why I have been such a tolerant person my whole life, why I have tolerated disrespect and abuse, because that is literally what I experienced from the time I entered this game. It's what I knew. There was a part of me that thought I deserved it. But more importantly, it's what I knew. So that became a pattern in my entire life. I was in an extremely abusive relationship in high school. I tolerated so much abuse, mental, emotional, physical. I thought being a tolerant person made me a good person. No, it made me a very disempowered, dysregulated, diseased person. Tolerance and acceptance are not the same thing. They're two very, very different energies because I've embodied both of them. Acceptance just comes as a natural byproduct after you've processed shit for as long as you need to process it for. Tolerance is just that. You are convincing yourself you tolerate certain behaviors, certain things, you tolerate it because you don't think you actually deserve anything better. So you tolerate it. That's not having an open heart. Having a very closed heart for yourself. So after I remembered this, I remember going through a couple weeks of like, I will never fucking tolerate shit again. Like you get this burst of power. I had this like burst of power, like, I will never abuse myself again. I will never, right? And that feels great when you can embody that for a time. And then you slip back into things happen in life and you start to slip back into the patterns, but not to the same degree. It'll never be to the same degree because I will never look at myself the same. I don't mean that in this, I'm a victim. No, quite honestly, now I realize I'm a warrior. And a warrior won't tolerate abuse, no matter where it's coming from. Internally, externally, it won't. It loves itself. So, been navigating this remembering since then. A couple weeks after that, I even went and saw The Sound of Freedom, not having any fucking clue. I mean, I knew what the story was about. Hence why I knew I was a badass to go see it, because my higher self was like, it's going to trigger a whole shitload of stuff for you, but you're doing it. I had no idea that it was like based in Colombia and all that good stuff. So what I realized after that movie, there was this subtle shift in me that gratitude, that pride I had in my country of origin that I discussed at the beginning, it was gone. It was a very subtle shift that happened until I had a very powerful experience. Oh my God, it was 2 weeks ago today. I did a sweat lodge at a wellness festival that brought it really full circle for me and helped me to realize that in my processing of remembering this trauma, I had all this love for myself, but then I had all this anger pent up inside towards the people that did this to me and towards men. Because I realized my whole life I've been afraid of men. Which is why as a kid, I was a super tomboy and I tried to over masculinize myself most of my life. I almost tried to be like the boys, be like the men, because there was this massive fear of men. So it was a very unconscious, subconscious thing I was doing. I didn't know that that's why I was doing it. But it was because of my fear of men that I felt like if I was one of them, if I was like one of them, I wouldn't have to be afraid of them. Right? So July, August were fucking tough months while I navigated all this. Because I didn't even really know everything I was feeling about all of it. Again, I had this burst of empowerment for myself. Like, you're a fucking badass. That you knew that that's what you were jumping into. And yet you still jumped into it. And look at you. You can still come out this loving being on the other side. Like, fucking own that. But then there was still this part of me that held anger towards the people that did it and the overall system, because they're part of the system, right, that runs that whole ring on this earth plane, in this dimension. So here came my anger again towards the external. And it brewed every day. And if you've listened to any of my other stuff, you know I don't like anger. I judge anger. Why do I judge anger? Because the men that did what they did to me were very angry men. I was imprinted with that anger very, 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 very young. And so the ego was afraid of that anger. So 2 weeks ago, today, I do a sweat lodge. Have I heard of sweat lodges? Yes. Did I have any expectation or any clue of what I was actually going in to do? No. Like I knew I was going in to sweat out my shit. I had no idea what my higher self had planned. Without going completely into it and just giving a brief synopsis of it, but still showing how powerful it was. This took place in New Mexico. It was on a whim. Hey, you want to do a sweat lodge? I'm at this wellness festival. Yeah, I want to do a sweat lodge. Anything to amplify my healing journey. So I go in the sweat lodge, which, mind you, is being run by an elder of the land, a medicine man. It's dark in there. Anybody that's never done one, it was like a tent, it was a makeshift thing that they made. But it was pitch black and it's hot as fuck because it's a sweat lodge. And you pile in with a whole bunch of other people. You're very close. And you basically, the whole point of it is to give your stuff to the fire, allow the fire to burn away what no longer serves, right? Now, all these things going through my head as I climb into this very enclosed, dark space on wet ground because it had rained too. Me being an empath, there's still a programmed fear in me, like, oh my God, I absorb everybody, I absorb everything, I feel everything. That's a disempowered empath. I speak like that because I hate that disempowered empath voice that comes through. But it still creeps in every now and then. So, I'm sitting in there and I'm like, oh my God, I'm sitting with like 25 people who are just airing out their shit. Like I don't want to absorb anybody's shit. And then it's like, settle down. Like that's a fear-based paradigm again that people still eat up. Your energy, everything's energy. You're always feeling energy. It doesn't even matter if you're physically near said energy. You feel energy. It's just what it is. And stop being so afraid to feel it. Because you've actually felt it your whole life. Now you're just acknowledging what you're feeling, so it feels scarier. But it's the exact same thing you have felt your whole life. And I have legitimately felt energy my whole life. I've been in this body my whole life. I know that. And I was even shown that in this journey. So flashback 2 Fridays ago. Before the sweat lodge, I forgot that morning I did they did a sound bath. What happens to me there? I'm brought to 2 near-death experiences that I had those first 14 months of my life. I was literally brought to the near-death experience. I was shown from my soul, like, hence why I said I was obsessed with near-death experiences last year, because I've had 2. I've had 2 of them in this physical avatar has had 2 in this lifetime. Again, full-on chills. Anybody that's still hanging in and needs physical validation, there you go. So that sound bath, I'm like, holy shit. I like, oh my God, I actually had near-death experiences when they were doing what they were doing. Of course I did. That's what amps up the blood that they take and the fluids that they take from you. So I go to these these remembering, I'm brought to these rememberings of these near-death experiences. It literally felt like yesterday. That's why I like time is fucking an illusion. It was like, oh my God. And it was crazy because I was like, I was connecting with that unity consciousness again and the oneness, and like literally seeing that my soul knew that this is what it was coming in for. Like there was no fear. And that then I was shown like my current life, and like it was wild. It was just wild. So I have that Friday morning. Well, then Friday night is when I do the sweat lodge. Long story short, the man running it, they have family that live in Colombia, and they had just come back from Colombia recently. And he was talking about, so, we're in there, we're introducing ourselves, where we're from, blah, blah, blah. I make the comment, I was born in Bogota, Colombia, and lived in, the States most of my life, blah, blah. When I said Bogota, Colombia, I either I psychically or he verbally did it out loud, made like that noise. I was like, that was weird. So we continue on. Somebody else in the circle come in, and they were like, oh, my mom is from Bogota, Colombia. And I'm like, fucking weird. There's Colombia again, right? I'm saying to myself. So then that prompts the gentleman who's running the thing to talk about how they just came back from Colombia. And he was talking about, a lot of the stuff they sell is from the natives and blah, blah, blah. And he was talking about it in a very positive way. And it was like, oh my God, I have this immediate realization as he's talking about it, that I was like, oh my God, I didn't realize how much I needed to hear somebody speak of that country in a good light again. I didn't even realize I had started to adopt a negative energy towards it, which did really happen after the Sound of Freedom. I'm not going to lie. That like amplified my fucking anger towards the country, towards the men, towards the system, towards all of it. Nonetheless, I knew I had to see the movie. But as he was talking about it, he was talking about it in such a loving way, and it immediately brought this like healing energy to me. So I'm just sitting there as he's talking, and now we start the sweat lodge thing, which it's like you chant, you sing, somebody in there's drumming, and and we're like, I don't know, a couple minutes into it, somebody has to leave. Somebody's like, I have to get up and go. Now they did tell us that if you absolutely have to leave in the middle of this, please wait. The little flap door will open 3 times during this session, because they open the flap to feed somebody's outside bringing us coals to feed the fire that's happening in the tent. So they did ask at the beginning, this is a sacred container. There's going to be a lot of energy flying around. If you truly feel like you have to leave, please wait till the flap opens. So I can't remember if this person waited till the first flap opened or if it was, again, I don't know, but they had to leave. Too much for them. So they get out and go. And the gentleman running it said, just going to say this right now. This is why I said before we started, you all have to really be in your integrity, meaning like be in your own energy. Do not take on other people's stuff. That is what the fire is for. When people share in a vulnerable way, it is not for, just like how I said at the beginning of this video, do not take on my trauma. That's not holding space. We can't hold space for others if we're just absorbing everybody's stuff. That's not being a powerful space holder. That's not having an open heart. So he really like coached us even before we went in about really going in with an open heart, but to be mindful of our energy and to be intentional about where we're sending it, and we're sending it to the fire. And when people share, it is not for us to say anything to them or give them advice or try to anything. It's literally just holding the space. Now, mind you, here's the other thing. This sweat lodge that they did, normally they do men and female separate, but for whatever reason that night they did a unisex one, and the majority of people in it were men. Powerful, right? What I tell you about my whole thing. Men, afraid of men. My whole paradigm was the man, right? The man did this. So I go into this sweat lodge, and there was probably about 25 of us, maybe 20 of us. And I would say there was 5 of us were women, myself included. So the rest were men. And the men sit on one side, the women sit on the other. So I'm in there and I'm like sitting there and I'm just listening to him talk about Colombia in a good way. And I'm like, oh, I didn't realize my heart needed that. And my head needed to hear that. I didn't actually realize how much anger I was holding towards this. I've been so focused on feeling this love for myself and nurturing myself through this that I didn't realize there was still an aspect of me that was fucking pissed. And so this first person leaves. Again, I don't remember when the flap opened or not. And the guy goes, just want to say, I had a feeling this was going to happen. Please, if anybody else needs to leave, I'm really requesting that you wait till the door opens. Really need to try to keep this a sacred container. I'm not surprised that happened. I feel there's things in here that some people aren't ready to sit with. So he says that, we carry on. Well, then the flap opens, and now the girl sitting right next to me, like, has to get up, like, pretty abruptly. So we let her out, and now I'm sitting there and I'm like, what the fuck? Is it me? Like, what is going on? And so now he says, for a second time, he's like, okay, people, if somebody in here has something they need to say it now, because people leaving can't keep happening. And he's like, and I'm going to be honest, there was something before this ceremony that did not want this ceremony to happen. They had a hard time starting the fire. Like, they just ran into like a battery of issues. But he said he kept hearing, work harder, work harder, work harder. It's supposed to happen. It's supposed to happen. So I guess it took a lot of physical effort to make the ceremony happen, as well as energetic effort. And so he said, we are continuing this, but if there is somebody in here that needs to say something, you need to say it now. And before I knew it, I just started talking. I was like, I think it's me. And he said, yes, dear child, what do you have to say? And I said, as I expressed at the beginning, I was born in Colombia. And in my spiritual journey, I've been having a lot of rememberings coming back, my time there and my birth parents. And I've been dealing with a very painful memory since July. And then I just started bawling. But it just all started coming out. And then he starts responding and goes on to tell me about this experience that he had there. Basically, that he tapped into that energy of all of the disgusting things that are being done to women and children there. And felt it to his core. And now we're both crying, and there's other people in there crying. And it was just like, what the fuck is happening? Like, how am I front and center in the sweat lodge? Like, this isn't, what, why is this happening? But yet, as painful, it was the most healing thing, because then he just kept talking, and he was like, I've walked the same path as you, sister, and forgiveness is the only way. We must forgive. And it was just like, and I could feel it pouring out of him. And then all the men, because I was like facing them the way we were sitting, I was across from them, and the way the fire was, like, I could see a lot of their faces. And they were just like, we need to forgive this paradigm. We need to forgive this narrative. And I realized how much at that moment I needed men to forgive men. Because I've been trying. But there's so much anger in man. There's so much anger. And it's poison. It is poison. Yeah. So that was my very transformative experience 2 weeks ago. As you can see, I'm still moving through it. And I'll share with you, I did buy from them because they sell a lot of stuff from their trips to Colombia. I bought a poncho the last day I was there that had the Colombian flag on it. I heard my higher self say, this is your healing poncho. This is to help you alchemize that distrust and the pain and the anger that you have towards that country, because it's not that country. It's this whole earth plane. It's not just that country. It's the same thing that people go through when they wake up to America and how much of a fucking facade it is. Like, you feel betrayed by your own country, right? It's so, like, what happens? We get angry. Of course. I just didn't even realize that I was even holding anger until I heard somebody talking about the country in a good way. And it was like, oh my God, I fucking needed that. Because apparently I've been stewing in anger about it. And even though knowing, even having those freaking euphoric experiences and literally being shown, like, I knew I signed up for that, literally. But the human self is still attached to those emotions and still processing the trauma. So yeah, it's medicine, right? When we can sit with our truths, the most painful ones, and accept them, that's when forgiveness happens. You cannot force forgiveness. You can't. It is a natural process. There's no forcing of it. We can make a conscious choice, a conscious decision to say, I'm going to choose to start forgiving this situation, this thing, this whatever, this person. But energetically, it happens naturally as you sit with your fucking shit over and over and feel it to a magnitude that, like, you've never felt it before, that you never even thought you could feel it until you don't feel it anymore. That's how the game of energy actually works. People are like, how long do I have to sit with this? I don't fucking know how long you have to sit with it. You might have to sit with it for 5 years. I don't really know. But you sit with it until there's nothing to sit with anymore. Until all of a sudden you have this feeling of, like, holy shit, I see the silver. I don't just see the silver linings. I am the fucking silver lining. So what I've learned is, as I sit with it over and over and over, and I'm not looking for it to sit with, it finds me. It tells me it's time to sit with it. I'm not looking for these things. In the beginning of this journey, you kind of go poking for your shadow. I never really felt like I did, to be honest, because I feel like my higher self apparently knew I was a badass and pretty much just shoved my shadow in my face, right from when I started waking up, as well as the shadow of the collective. So I've been sitting with this shit for fucking 5 years. Different magnitudes of it, but it's still the same shit. It's the same narrative. It's the same energy. But I can promise you this, the more I sit with it, the less it has a control on me, the less it has this unconscious control on me. the more I am responsible for my, people talk about being responsible for their emotions and their thoughts. First of all, you can't fucking control them. Being responsible and mature just means you're aware of them and you're not going to project them onto people. That's all being responsible with. You can't change your emotion. You can't change your thought pattern. You have to surrender to what is before you can even attempt to start creating new in there. You can try really fucking hard to create things new, but not if you're still attached to the old. And it's the same fucking thing in this world. We can't fucking create a new earth if our hearts are still closed and we're attached to the old way of doing things. You fucking can't. I didn't write these rules. This is just how this game works. Well, we all wrote these rules, actually. So you can either fight it or accept it. But I promise you that acceptance is not, the energy of acceptance is not bending over and being a fucking doormat. That's tolerance. Acceptance comes with compassion and love. It just comes. It is forgiveness. It literally takes a warrior heart to get to that energy level. That's acceptance. You're not just a fucking, literally, let me lay down and succumb to everything and be a victim. That's not acceptance. The outside world will tell you that it is. You'll be perceived as that. You'll be perceived as ignorant. You will. Because I did it. I judged people that embodied that energy, and I couldn't understand. I couldn't understand that behind closed doors, they were sitting with their dark shit and feeling it and getting themselves to a space of acceptance and forgiveness. You'll know when you accept things. You'll know when you forgive it. You'll just fucking know. You won't be trying. There will be no trying to do it. It's actually a very natural process. This whole evolution process is a natural process. Healing, whatever the fuck that even is. It's a natural process that the ego would love to control. Would love to put a timestamp on it and say, I'm done with this trauma. Oh, I'm done feeling this one. Okay. I guarantee your body will tell you something different because it's just going to come up for you. Or your thought forms that are fucking repetitive over and over. That's your body telling you you haven't released this yet, because here it still is. So, as I started this with an open heart, what an open heart is. An open heart is willing to accept all of these paradigms, all of these narratives, all of these things that those of you that still don't want to know it, that are calling it conspiracy theory, that's not an open heart. You're afraid. You're afraid to know the truth because you're afraid to feel it. Why? Because it hurts? Does it hurt? Yeah, it fucking hurts. Yeah, it really fucking hurts. But I can tell you, as somebody that used to live as a very unconscious suffering person, that hurt way fucking more because I hurt a lot more people that way. Because I was unconscious and I was just bleeding my shit out to people. Thought it was love. That actually hurts me more than me sitting with my hurt and owning all of it. And knowing the more I do, the less I'm projecting and oozing that out to everybody around me. So yeah, all these narratives that you're afraid to face, it's probably because there's an aspect of you that has undergone something of that magnitude. hello, there's me. This is why I've always had so much fucking compassion on how I share this with people, because I said it from the fucking start. We do not know what people are walking around with in their traumatic fucking baggage storage locker. We have no fucking clue. And then we try to shove all of this in people's faces. We can't be open to receiving that with an open heart, because we haven't even done the most minute digging within ourselves to know what we're carrying. So the more shit that comes out there, because it's just going to keep getting louder, more truths, and then distorted truths and distorted truths upon distorted truths. They're all just going to keep getting louder. So everybody thinks they're waking up. And we are. But can you open your heart to all of those realities? And more importantly, can you open your heart to them, but not internalize it and become those realities? Because that is a fine fucking line we're all walking. I walk it every day. Every day I walk that line. Do I become the darkness today because that's the easier thing to do? Or do I be the light with the open heart, with the compassion for self? Because that is a fucking warrior. And you're all warriors. So lead with love, compassion, and an open heart, because you are not alone. None of us are. None of us are alone. And I am not a victim. And I forgive. And I will keep forgiving. As deep as that forgiveness goes, I will. Because I love myself. And I love you. Thank you.